Shalom, and welcome to Tov, the Jewish news channel. We have with us today former ambassador to Italy from Israel, Dror Eydar, who is also a PhD in literature and has written a number of books on that subject. And I'd like to ask you about what's happening in Europe now, about anti-Semitism that we see rising in Europe. In the past, we always said that the anti-Semitism was Christian in nature, but we're living now in a post-Christian Europe. Europe is no longer Christian as it once was. What is the source of this anti-Semitism now?
So basically, we used to say that we have two kinds of anti-Semitism. The old anti-Semitism, which were based on a religious aspect. Means we know everything. We know that the Jews killed God, or they did not accept their Messiah, Jesus. So God left them and chose Christianity, chose church. So we had to suffer the punishment or the wrath of God and also the wrath of the mob during medieval and also after that. So this is the basic religious anti-Semitism. But during the 18th century and forward and onward, means in the 19th century, when the Jews decided to come back again into history, means from being from living in the margins of European society with no rights, they started receiving some civil rights and also some rights to enter universities. I told once in the Italian Senate, can you imagine the 19th century without the Jews, without all the scientists and inventions and theories, without the Jews? It's because they let us enter their universities. So basically, in this first stage, the Jews wanted only equal rights as other segments in European societies, and no more. And even then, paradoxically, even when the Jews left their traditional appearance, their traditional even belief or way of life, anti-Semitism flourished. And after that, when Jews were disappointed by what happened in European societies, because most of them felt as foreigners in their societies, even though they were in they held a very strong positions in governments or universities, but basically they felt strangers or foreigners, not belong to the societies which define themselves, even though secular, but define themselves as Christians.
We're
So
talking about the Emancipation period, basically.
yes, Emancipation period, and after the Emancipation period, yes.
So we have the
So
classic example of Colonel Dreyfus, the Dreyfus trial,
oh,
where
so
he was
Dreyfus
accused as an individual, but the mobs were shouting death to the Jews. In other words, the Jew is always
Dreyfus,
seen as the representative of a collective, never as an individual.
yes. So I always say to my opponents that if they talk to me as you in plural, they lost me. So Dreyfus was, let's say, the end of this period that sealed the hope of, let's say, the Jewish elite to integrate in a very pleasant way in European society. So in those days, the Jews started thinking that their salvation will be outside of Europe. There were many waves of immigrants, mostly to North America. We are speaking about 2 million Jews that left East Europe and moved to North America. But there were some tens of thousands of Jews that changed history. Not the Jews of America changed history. The Jews that preferred to hold their history in their hand and to change it by coming back to our ancestral homeland. In order, the scope, the purpose of their immigration was to reestablish the Jewish kingdom, to reestablish our place, one place in the world again as a Jewish state. So it helped the rise of Zionism because it started before Herzl. But after Herzl, it became more and more common. And paradoxically, this was also, this ignited the rise of anti-Semitism more and more, let's say, until the culmination of this wave of anti-Semitism in the face of the Holocaust. So what is the source of what we saw then and what we see even now? We see now some segments of European elite, also American elite, that supports some societies that opposes their way of life. I mean, Hamas, I mean, the radical Islam. And even though they prefer to support them and to smash Israel, to back Israel, because they see in us all the points or the aspects of evil that in their theories took place. So what is the roots of all this? So let me say that what was the main image, the main icon that the Western person, Westernized person, saw during his life from his birth until his death over plus minus 2,000 years? The main image, the central image of European Western societies was of a crucified Jew. Who was Jesus? Jesus was a Jew from Galilee, let's say Israeli, that preached to the Jews there. He says also in the New Testament that I came only to the Jews, to my brothers. So after according to the church, we did not accept him as Messiah. So all this happened. But the image that even now, every European see, more than Coca-Cola and other, is a crucified Jew. So anti-Semitism was a compulsive repetition of this trauma, because this is the trauma, the major trauma in psychohistorical terms, the major trauma of a Europe society, which means crucifixion. So when you have a trauma and you are in a situation of post-trauma, you want to repeat this trauma in order to maybe to fix it. So anti-Semitism, all these riots and murders and all these horrible things that we suffer during history were, in psychohistorical terms, compulsive repetitions of of um, of this trauma, which was the crucifixion. Crucifixion of one Jew in the beginning of history led to the crucifixions of millions of Jews. Let's say that Golgotha, the modern Golgotha, was in Auschwitz. So, but the meaning of, so this was religious, but what was the meaning of Zionism? What was the meaning, what is the meaning of the establishment of the state of Israel in those terms? The meaning is that Jesus went down of his cross, put his prayer shawl, the talith, on him again, and went back to his homeland in Galilee. Which means that, and in this time, he holds a weapon and say, now come and crucify me again. I will not let you crucify me again. The meaning of the state of Israel is the distortion of this myth in psychohistorical terms. It means that it is very, very strange to see Jesus defend himself from being crucified again.
And so now we are being
So we have,
punished for changing the
yes,
myth. And
it's
that's
not only
how
punished. It's not only punished.
anti-Semitism becomes anti-Zionism.
Yes. So we have two options. One option of being a Jew. One option is to take the role that we were meant to take during history, means to be to be victims, to victimize ourselves, to be Jesus on the cross.
To lie back
This
and die.
is,
To let ourselves be
yes,
killed.
this is Holocaust. This is Holocaust. This is all the riots, all the pogroms, everything. The other options is a Jew that defends itself. Jesus does not want to be crucified, again. So, if we can understand, if we may take this metaphor to our life now, to the actual situation now in the world and in Israel, we may say that it's very strange in historical terms to see Jews who are defending their lives and do not want, how strange, to be crucified again. But there was also a wise Jew in the end of the 19th century, also fruits of this emancipation, named Sigmund Freud. He spoke about the role of dreams, let's say the unconscious. Many times we repress our fears, our taboos, we repress them inside our subconscious personality, and we do not want to deal with them. But once we sleep, these post-trauma or these traumas rising from the abyss of oblivion and overwhelming us, means that we must confront them. So these myth of crucified Jew became now like a dream for the Western, for the West, while the reality is not a Jew as a victim, a Jew that defends himself. and they have to cope with this dissonance. And you know what?
This is all despite the fact that Europe has thrown off Christianity. It's no longer, they don't go to churches
Yeah,
anymore. Many of the churches have been turned into mosques, for God's sake.
you're right. You're
But
right.
it's somewhere deeply imbued in their culture and in
Yes.
their.
We are speaking about myth. We are speaking about psychohistorical terms. It means that it embedded in our collective memory. It influences us more. Let's speak about a persona, a person with this personality. We know that the major things that influence us are not, we are not aware of them. So even though publicly they are not religious, but this image that Jews were for 2,000 years victims and now they change it, very strange. They have to cope with it. It's uncomfortable to deal with it. And I want to tell you something about the UN. The UN is the place of the biblical family of nations. And in this family of nations, they tell us every day now, you do not belong. You do not belong to us. But think about it. Once in the history of the UN, these institutions function in a good way, at least to us. In November 29th, 1947, when they decided on the partition plan, in favor of the partition plan, which was the decision to establish our third Jewish state after 2,000 years of dreaming about it. Why was it? Because for 6 years that preceded the establishment of the state of Israel, we took, we played the role in the high, prestigious way, the
A
role
victim
of
of the
being
victim.
victim in
Okay.
the Holocaust. And then they took, and also, so they let us after having this heavy price, they let us establishing our state, but in condition not to change very much our role as victims. So in the
Don't win
7th
too much.
of I want to tell you that in October 7th, when they saw this massacre of our daughters and children, burned alive children with their parents, raped our daughters, beheaded our sons. So for one day, we received again the empathy of the world because in one day we played this role of victims. But the change in history, as I told also my colleagues in Italy, the change of history of our faith is that now every second day of pogroms in history, what could the Jews do? Only to hide or to escape or to run away.
Or to die.
Now, or to die, of course. And now, on October 8th, the Jews, how strange, rise again and fought back. They fought back, which means they we chose, of course, in all our 75 years of independence, we chose this option of not being crucified again,
Okay.
the option of coming back to our ancestral home, take our talith again, put our talith again,
And our rifle.
and and our right, and being again a free nation that strive to live in peace. But if necessary, we know how to hold also a sword. So this is the strength. And this paradoxically brings back again anti-Semitism to peaks of hate that we did not see in the last years. And I want to add only one point. We did not speak about the contribution of Islam and the Muslim immigrants to Europe in this part. But I think that it's enough
So we'll discuss
to
that the next
understand
time
the
because our
change.
time is up. Thank you very much, Ambassador Dr. Eydar. And thank you to our viewers. And don't forget to subscribe to all our channels, YouTube, Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter. Shalom.